Okay, so early retirement, right? It's like the dream. Who wouldn't want to ditch the 9 to 5, say goodbye to the alarm clock, all of that?
It's definitely appealing.
But, and here's the big thing, it's not just about not working. It's got to be about having the financial freedom to actually enjoy all that free time, you
Yeah.
know? And that's what makes this deep dive so interesting, I think. We're diving into some advice from a financial expert. Their insights come from a Spanish-speaking context, but honestly, the stuff they're talking about, it's universal. It applies to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I find fascinating about this particular expert is how they're not afraid to challenge like the traditional wisdom. They take the 4% rule, which so many people see as this golden rule of retirement planning, and they kind of pick it apart. They show why it might not work in today's world.
Right. For anyone who needs a refresher, that 4% rule basically says you can withdraw 4% of your retirement savings each year without, ever running out of money. Sounds pretty good, on the surface at least.
It does, but this expert points out, like, that rule was created in a totally different time. People are living longer now, markets are way more unpredictable, and inflation, forget about it. So they argue that sticking rigidly to that 4% rule, especially if you're retiring early, could actually backfire.
Yeah, it's like that saying, what got you here won't get you there.
Yeah.
You need a plan that's built for early retirement, not just a one-size-fits-all kind of deal.
Exactly. And that's where this expert's advice gets, I think, super practical. They offer a couple of adjustments to the traditional 4% rule, ones that are really geared towards, like you said, people who want to retire early.
Okay, so what's the first adjustment? I'm all ears.
The first one is what they call dynamic withdrawals. So picture this. You've just retired early, maybe feeling pretty good about it, and then bam, the market tanks. With the traditional 4% rule, you'd have to sell your investments at a loss just to cover your expenses.
Oh, yeah. That's not a good feeling.
Yeah.
So how do dynamic withdrawals help with that?
Instead of being locked into taking out that fixed 4% no matter what, you adjust the amount you withdraw each year based on how the market's doing. If the market's down, you withdraw a bit less, maybe tap into your emergency fund a little. If the market's booming, you could withdraw a little more.
So it's about being flexible. You're not
Yeah.
just stuck in a storm. You can adjust your sails, so to speak.
Exactly. Now, the second adjustment they suggest is more on the conservative side. They recommend lowering your withdrawal rate to 3%.
So playing it even safer.
Right. Now, this might mean you need to save a bit more aggressively while you're working, but it drastically increases the chances that your money will last throughout your entire retirement, even if you live to be 100.
100. Okay, well, that brings up another point. Before we can even think about withdrawing money, we have to actually have those savings built up, right?
Yeah.
And we both know stuffing cash under the mattress isn't exactly a solid retirement plan.
Definitely not. This expert is a big proponent of investing, specifically building a globally diversified portfolio of index funds.
I like how they actually walk through an example of someone investing part of like a 2,000 euro salary.
Yeah.
Seeing those numbers grow over time, thanks to compound interest, is eye-opening for sure.
Yeah, it really shows how much consistency matters even with smaller contributions. They really drive home the idea that financial freedom, especially early retirement, is a marathon, not a sprint.
And every marathon runner needs the right shoes. For a smart investor, that's a solid strategy.
One thing that stood out to me was their take on dividend-paying stocks. They're not always the sure thing that people think.
Yeah, that's true. They argue that while those dividends seem appealing, I mean, who doesn't like getting paid just to own something, right? It can actually give you less control over your finances. You might end up having to sell those assets at the worst possible time when the market's down.
So you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. You need the income, but selling at a low point could really hurt you in the long run.
Exactly. This expert seems to be all about having a more balanced, flexible approach, and I think that makes a lot of sense. It's about not putting all your eggs in one basket. Which, now that you mention it, reminds me of another point this expert made. It's not just about diversifying your investments. It's about diversifying your income streams, too.
Right, exactly.
When most people think about income, they think about their job, their 9 to 5. But when you're talking about early retirement, you kind of have to think outside that box.
Right, absolutely. This expert talks a lot about building up passive income streams, like creating multiple rivers flowing into your lake of wealth, as they put it.
I love that analogy. It paints such a clear picture. Okay, so we're diversifying, we're building multiple income streams. What else did this expert say that really stuck with you?
Well, this one might seem obvious, but they really emphasize how important it is, especially for early retirees, to know your magic number.
The magic number.
Yeah.
You mean like how much money you actually need to retire comfortably?
Yeah.
Because that's something I've definitely been like trying to wrap my head around.
Exactly that. And they actually give a pretty simple formula for figuring it out. Basically, you take your expected yearly expenses in retirement, and you multiply that number by either 25 or 33, depending on how much risk you're comfortable with.
Okay, hold on. Why 25 or 33? What do those numbers represent?
So multiplying by 25, that aligns with the traditional 4% withdrawal rate. The 33, that's more conservative, more in line with the 3% withdrawal rate. So just as an example, let's say you want to live on, I don't know, 40,000 euros a year in retirement. If you're going with the 3% rule, you'd be aiming for a nest egg of something like 1.3 million euros.
Okay, wow. Suddenly, early retirement feels a lot less like a whimsical dream and a lot more like, serious financial planning.
Yeah, for sure. But here's where I think this expert's advice is really helpful. They get that seeing those big numbers can be, well, intimidating, right? So they really emphasize that even small contributions, if you're consistent, can really add up over time. That whole compound interest thing, it's powerful.
It's like the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're all about empowering people to take control no matter where they are in their journey. They even break down how much of a difference your savings rate can make. Like, even a small increase can shave years off your retirement timeline.
Seriously. Okay, that's actually really motivating to hear.
Right. And it's not just about saving more. They also talk about finding ways to maybe boost your income, like through side hustles or freelancing. And of course, being mindful of your spending.
Make that money work for you,
Yeah.
especially if you're serious about retiring early. Another thing that really resonated with me was what they said about minimizing debt, specifically housing costs.
Oh, yeah, that was a big one for them. They argue that housing is, for a lot of people, the biggest expense in retirement, especially if you haven't paid off your mortgage.
So their advice is basically to try to get rid of that mortgage before you retire, if at all possible.
If you can swing it, absolutely. It's all about freeing up your cash flow later down the line.
Okay, so I'm curious. A lot of this expert's advice, it's coming from a Spanish context, right? Does that make it less relevant for someone who is, say, living in a different part of the world?
That's what's so interesting. The underlying principles, they're universal. Compound interest, diversification, smart spending, those concepts, they apply no matter where you live.
So really, it's about adapting those principles to your own situation, your own goals.
Exactly.
It's really empowering to realize that, right? Like
Mhm.
the tools for building a good financial future, they're out there for anyone to use. But okay, there's one more thing this expert was really passionate about, something that honestly I think gets overlooked a lot, especially when you're thinking about early retirement and all the fun stuff you're going to do.
Are you talking about taxes?
Taxes. It's not just a thing when you're working. They follow you into retirement.
Yeah, they definitely do. In fact, this expert made it clear. Understanding how taxes are going to affect your investments during retirement, that's non-negotiable. It's got to be part of the plan. And it gets even trickier if you're thinking about, like you are, retiring abroad.
Oh, for sure. Can you imagine planning this idyllic retirement, beaches and all that, only to realize, whoops, a big chunk of your savings is going to the tax man?
Yeah, not ideal. And that's exactly what this expert wants to help people avoid. They're all about doing your homework, understanding the tax laws in the place where you want to retire, because those laws, they can be vastly different from country to country.
It's like they're saying, hey, don't let that beautiful beach view distract you from the fine print.
Exactly. They want you to enjoy every minute of your early retirement, and that includes not getting blindsided by, like, a massive tax bill.
So it's about being strategic, being informed. It's not just about sipping cocktails on the beach.
Well, it's about being able to sip those cocktails without stressing about your finances.
Touché. So what's the takeaway here? It sounds like this expert is really big on being proactive.
100%. Retirement planning, it's not something to just wing, right? Especially early retirement. It's about doing your research, considering all the angles, and honestly, if you're feeling overwhelmed, talking to a financial advisor, someone who really gets all the ins and outs, especially when it comes to international taxes and all that.
Like having a guide to help you navigate all those, financial waters, avoid the hidden reefs.
Exactly. When it comes to something as important as your financial future, it's worth taking the time to get it right.
I think that's a great note to end on. This expert, they've given us so much to think about, challenging old rules, offering new approaches, and really giving us a map for navigating this whole early retirement thing, which can feel pretty overwhelming, to be honest.
Totally. And they've done it in a way that's engaging, not just a lecture. It reminds you that financial planning, it doesn't have to be scary or boring. It can be about taking control and designing a future where you've got the freedom to do what you want.
I love that, designing your ideal life. So for anyone out there listening who's dreaming of early retirement, keep that in mind, right? Knowledge is power. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and never underestimate what you can achieve with a good plan.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This deep dive has given us a lot to think about, that's for sure. So until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.